Teachers of Reddit, when did you realize a kid was gifted? Foreign exchange student from China in the 8th grade. His writing abilities far exceeded the majority of even the accelerated class. I moved him from regular English to accelerated, and not only was his writing strong, his insights were so deep and thoughtful. At the end of the year, I learned not only was he a top student in my class, he won Student of the Year in Spanish as well. An interesting test for toddlers is to see if they can hold an extended, back-and-forth conversation with adults. Most kids at this age, and most grown-ass adults, are just asking for something or telling you something. I teach at university, so most of the people you are dealing with are fairly intelligent otherwise. What generally impresses me is the occasional student who has a high capacity for original thought. Most people are capable of getting a degree, it's not particularly difficult once you've learnt the rules. What distinguishes a gifted scholar from anyone else is the capacity to think creatively and originally. It is the ability to look at a problem and think about various pathways of solving it, a willingness to try new things, and a high degree of openness to unknown things. Usually, you can tell a really able student when they preface a question with "what if" or similar terms, as it generally indicates that they are thinking of alternatives, hypotheticals, and trying to answer it. This is always a good sign and often shows positive engagement. By contrast, you can often tell a weaker student when they regularly ask questions such as "what's the bare minimum, will this be on the test," etc. These are not bad questions as such, but it indicates that their priority is to get the mark, grade and leave. If that is your priority, fair enough, I hope you do well, but it will restrict your capacity to think creatively and originally. I teach foreign language at a university, and one semester I get a notification that there will be a minor under 18 in the class. I have to take some online test about that, so it's a bit annoying, but fine. Anyway, flash forward to a couple weeks into the semester. I'm talking with one of my students during the break. He's an advanced undergrad in his junior year, taking grad courses in theoretical topology. Thinning hair, glasses. Also very interested in philosophy, which was my major in college, so we got along on that front. I figured he was a little older than everyone else, and had come to college late or something. Then it comes out. He's 17. He was so brilliant that he gave his high school principal an ultimatum after his first year: either they give him the degree early and he goes straight to college, or he drops out and goes to college anyway. Ivy Leagues were already looking to recruit him. I'd never encountered a genius before that. And he was just this very humble, unassuming guy. Always did his homework and showed up on time. I'm a preschool teacher, and I knew a 3-year-old girl that had very extensive vocabulary and could already read really well. Once during lunchtime, a little boy scarfed down his food and her response was, "Wow, he must have been famished." I was blown away. She also taught me about the digestive system once during lunchtime, and it was accurate information. But her favorite subject was the solar system. She was full of facts about the solar system, and she would teach me new things all the time. I always told her mom that she wasn't ready for kindergarten, she's ready for college. I gave a choice board assignment to my class. One of the choices was to write a song or monologue with a strong purpose. I said they could use a song that already exists and write new lyrics, just so they wouldn't get overwhelmed. One of my 13-year students, who has apparently never written a song before, wrote, recorded, and mixed a 5-minute-long original song, with harmonies. All in 5 days. The lyrics are beautifully written and vivid and introspective, and the song is musically well-structured. At 13, I thought I was a genius for rhyming life and strife once. This student wrote an Anais Mitchell song on their first try. biology teacher here, had a new student come in at age 15. He didn't talk much but he did all his work as asked and did it well. One day we were having a class discussion about something and he joined in. It ended up being a back and forth between just the two of us, and at some point I realized I was discussing pretty high-level stuff with a 15-year-old. He's a neurosurgeon now. I'm a special ed teacher and I teach kids who have emotional and behavior disabilities like oppositional defiance disorder or autism, which manifests as anger, that kind of stuff. But anyway, last year I had a kid who we think had a photographic memory and was a possible savant. He could see a map once and be able to draw it nearly perfectly hours or even days and months later. He had almost every detail too, and all the towns and cities spelled correctly and major land features and even the major highways correctly labeled and named. He also was like a human calculator. You could ask him nearly any math equation and he could answer it in a few seconds in his head. Granted, they couldn't be extreme equations, but pretty much anything like PEMDAS-wise he could do in his head quickly. His trouble was that he was very aggressive and we could never put him back in a gen ed classroom because he was such a danger to other kids and teachers if he became annoyed or upset. But he was a good kid and very intelligent, he just had a lot of trouble with his emotions and behaviors. Not a traditional teacher, but I taught guitar at a mom-and-pop guitar store in my hometown. A few years ago, a lady brought her 7-year-old daughter in for formal training. Now, 99/100th times, a kid that young wants to play the guitar until they get one. After that, it sits in a corner and collects dust until it makes its way to Goodwill or something. This girl had legitimate talent though. She managed to teach herself very basic chords on her own, and had even began writing music. Everything I taught her, she learned within seconds. I also discovered through comparison with my own ear training, that she had perfect pitch. Musicians are dicks. Many of us rarely recognize or appreciate true talent in someone else, but this girl was truly something special. If she isn't a famous, successful musician someday, it will be a travesty. I was teaching distance over time graphs. The students stated that if the line just went straight up that it would indicate teleportation because distance has been gained but no time has passed. This was 5th grade science. Edit, this kid ended up skipping 6th and 7th grade. 5th to 8th. He was a super humble kid, I miss having him in my class. One child, he was more ahead of his peers in every aspect, it seemed like he was babysitting the rest of his classmates. After a week of teaching the class simple coding, he built a fully functional multiplayer game with material he taught himself. This was at age 8. Another child, consistently produced excellent work, finished early and could discuss his viewpoints in depth and actually made me change my viewpoint. He was brilliant in maths. Once I was explaining a new concept to the class and worked out one example together. I told them that I would guide them in the second example so that I can help whoever needs, and I hear a really genuine and cute oops. I just finished them all now. I teach editing to grad students in creative writing programs, but I once witnessed a kid who was so amazing that I know I was witnessing pure, raw genius at work. Her big sister was in my daughter's 3rd grade class. A bunch of us mommies were just chatting and laughing with our kids' teacher, in their classroom, while our kids and their siblings milled around the classroom. Out of the corner of my eye I was noticing one tiny little kid about 3 years old. She was staring at the alphabet border near the ceiling and asked another kid to tell her how both the big and little letters say, not their names. I know my ABCs. I guess she thought upper and lower case might be different. The big kid did, even the complications of C and Y. The toddler looked at the border, saying each of the sounds. She had our attention then. then toddled over to a book, The Celery Stalks at Midnight, sat on the floor with it and sounded out the words. Slowly, and awkwardly at first, then faster, until they sounded right, maybe not knowing all their definitions, but that didn't stop her. By then we were all watching, mesmerized. She finished her awkward first pass, then read a few pages out loud to us, prefacing it with, "This is a funny book, Mommy, listen." She was only 3 years old, and with minimal help, she had taught herself to read in about 20 minutes. That remains the single most amazing few minutes of my life. I knew I was in the presence of a magnificent human mind and I was deeply moved. I'm not a teacher, but I was for a while a medicine student and met an extremely gifted mate there. He was just 16 instead of 18, we found out later. He came from a Middle Eastern country and didn't speak a single word in our language. In less than a month he learnt enough of the language to maintain a conversation, to follow classes, and to get around 95/100ths questions right in our first anatomy test. From that moment on, he just aced every single exam, and today he's working as a surgeon in the most important hospital of his country. Ain't a teacher and it's my little brother, but I thought I'll share it. When I was around 14 and he was around 6 years old, I would watch lots of YouTube videos in English, ain't our native language, and he would just sit on the bed behind me and watch for hours. I thought he was just bored and didn't understand anything from what was being said. FFW, a year we were on a long car ride and he picked up a history book in English. After a couple hours he tells us he is done reading it. Dad laughs and says, "Oh sure." I ask him to read a sentence and translate it. He proceeds to absolutely nail it and shock us. We took standardized tests like the second week of school. Hadn't really done much academics yet as it was elementary school, grade 5, and most of what we'd done was routines and introductions, games. Kids scored at a 10th grade level in math and 9th grade in reading. Okay. Whatever, impressive but not unheard of. Except this kid was at the worst school in the state. Literally. Ranked dead last. His whole schooling career. Nobody else in my class scored above a 6th grade level in anything and most were 3/4 grade level. I basically had to do entirely separate lesson plans for this kid. While the rest of my class did multiplication facts, I had a coding curriculum and was teaching him basic languages. He had his own reading group in addition to the high reading group. It was even more incredible, because he'd always been in trouble and in the principal's office the years before. I sent him to ISS once. All year. Really low for that school, kids on other classes went literally daily, I had a few go once a week. I begged his mom to switch him out of that school track, said I'd fill out any paperwork, write any letters. It was my only year as a teacher, not sure what happened to him. Mom never contacted me. He finished the year by shattering all of his records on testing exams. Literally the 0.01% on his tests. He's legitimately one of the smartest kids I'd ever met, from the poorest school with the worst conditions I've ever seen. Imagine a kid whose behavior was so bad you had to send him to the International Space Station as a punishment. You. Get in the rocket. Now. Not a teacher, but a student with a gifted kid in his class. In 3rd grade we had a new student come in who had just moved to the country with his family. Our teacher saw he was smart, she challenged him with some math we were meant to learn in a couple weeks. He solved the problems no problem. Next she tried some 4th grade level math, again he solved it with no problems. After that she called in one of the 5th grade teacher and she gave him some problems meant for 5th graders. As expected he solved those without any problems. They kept going until he got a question partially right. I believe at that point they were giving him stuff intended for early, mid-year 6th grade students. Last I heard this kid got a degree in mathematics from Carnegie Mellon University. I used to put a math joke puzzle in the corner of the whiteboard. Essentially 3 golden triangle numbers arranged in a triangle, and a puzzle which gave the letter I as a result in the middle. In short, it was an Illuminati joke. I had this up for quite a few classes, with nobody being able to guess what on earth it was. Until the last class of the day, a student who suffered from particularly invasive autism just came in, took maybe 3 seconds at most, and then laughed saying, "Why have you drawn the Illuminati symbol on the board?" It wasn't so much that it was impossible, I was just blown away by how quickly he managed to do it. This kid was always bright but never really inspired by much of what he did. Seemed a little lazy but wasn't troublesome. He was just kind of a neutral kid in the class. We did one day of Lewis structures and he thought it was too easy. Gave him a harder worksheet which he finished in like 3 seconds. So I gave him an organic formula that had 12 different isomers and some resonance structures. He came up with all of them in less than 15 minutes, including ones that had to do with how the object would look in 3D even though we never covered it. Kid is currently working on his PhD at Yale in organic chemistry. Was this in high school? That's impressive for an undergraduate. I am an organic professor and resonance really screws most of my students for some reason. It was in high school. I have my master's in organic, so I like to sprinkle it into my high school class more than others. I was shocked when this kid was asking questions about chirality to me, not using the term but expressing the idea, and had to break out my Orgo book to find problems for him while the other students were still grasping, if we share 2 electrons we get a covalent bond. The kid just got it and could see how the structures went together and how pieces would fit. I had him doing mechanisms pretty quickly just to keep him interested. He essentially took a different class than the rest of his peers from that point until the end of the year. Not a teacher, but when I was in a top-tier U.S. West Coast college, taking a third-year biochemistry class, meaning there were a few semesters of prereqs, we had a classmate who came with her dad. She was so young that her feet couldn't touch the floor when she was seated in the chairs of the lecture room. That bastard probably messed up the grading curve. Science teacher here, UK. The most gifted kids I've ever taught are those that in year 7, 11/12ths of a year old. Never gave up. Always pushed on even when wrong and just kept trying. These are the kids that started average but walked away with, once or twice, getting 100% on a GCSE test. Part might be an inbuilt natural ability. But to me a truly gifted kid is the one that takes failure and turns it into a learning chance. As they will always get further in life. Took a summer job helping at a daycare. One of the toddlers, about 18 months old, was way ahead of the rest. Could talk full sentences, knew his ABCs, could count beyond 20. Already had shapes and colors down. I've seen kindergarten-aged kids that haven't mastered some of these things. He's in his early 20s now with a master's in engineering and a 6-figure salary. I knew when he surprised me by reassembling an engine out of a car all by himself in a single 90-minute class period. It was right before school let out for COVID. I had to hurry up and get some projects thrown back together quickly since school was closing. He asked to do it, so I let him try and went off to do other things. By the end of the class it was completely assembled. Never asked me for help and it was working. Definitely gifted. Not really a kid, per se, but when I was teaching in uni, one of my first-year students wrote a paper that was too good to be true. Now, I'd had several plagiarists over the years, so I did my diligence and asked him if he could come to my office hour to discuss his paper. This is a good test, because a plagiarist will not likely be able to actually discuss what they wrote in any detail. Well, this kid proceeded to just blow it out of the fucking water. Not only did he write the paper, but he was also able to describe all of the theory behind it in great detail. Kid got an A+ in the class, needless to say. He could easily have jumped straight into a PhD. Legit superstar. Science teacher here. I had a new student join my environmental science class on the day of a pretty difficult test. I told him that he could try the test and if he scored poorly, then I would simply not count it in his grade. I really just wanted to get a feel for what he learned at his previous school. Well, he finished the test in about 5 minutes. He got a perfect score and provided the best answer to the extra credit question at the end. I walked to the principal's office after the class period and asked for him to be removed from my class and placed in advanced chemistry. I think he ended up with a 97% in the chemistry class by the end of the year. You heard it on herddit.radio. Thank you for listening and we hope to see you next time.